Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 29th of October 2023. We're going to start our military aid segment with the news that, this is, what's his name, Kamyshin. Alexander Kamyshin. So the guy that was in charge of the railways previously did a really good job to keep the railways going when all the infrastructure was being hit and during the time of refugees fleeing from the country. Did such a good job that Zelensky moved him to be the Minister of Strategic Industries of Ukraine, which is such an important position because it's about creating the military industrial complex for the defense of the nation. And making sure that there's indigenous output, strategic output, like thinking about what they need, how much of what they need. Obviously, they need everything and lots of it, but what are the priorities? How can they go about doing it? He's by all accounts done a fabulous job there, where the Ukrainians have ramped up production of a number of different things. But he says no country in the world is able to cover the needs of ammunition in Ukraine. Okay, that's pretty big. So, quote, and even if all the countries of the free world unite, there will not be enough capacity to cover it, he emphasized. And this is true. The needs of Ukraine in terms of artillery usage, ammunition usage on a daily basis still outstrips what basically all of her allies can put together still. And even though those allies are ramping up their own productions, there is a mismatch. Of course, this is going to be the case for Russia as well. Russia have been recently relying on stockpiles from North Korea, and they, I don't think, will be able to last for a particularly long time. They are, I think, as I say, stockpiles rather than consistent production of munitions that are supplied to Russia. North Korea had their own issues, right, in production, and they rely on China. China have got to play it particularly carefully. It's difficult for Russia. It's difficult for Ukraine. Neither side have the ammunition, the artillery shells that they need to prosecute the war that they want. But I guess it's who are able to be more sustainable and what are the levels that they are able to produce going forward. My guess is, and from analyses done sometime before, like fairly recently, I shared with you a couple of weeks ago, it looks like Ukraine will be overtaking Russia in terms of artillery usage, although that was possibly before North Korean artillery shells came into the picture. So, but I still think Ukraine will be in a better position than Russia going forward. It's still not quite enough, though. Okay, lots of talk still about the Frankensam, which is the hybrid air defense system that has been created between Ukraine and the US. So there's lots of talk about that. To meet the demand, the US is producing so-called Frankensam systems that marry advanced Western weaponry with Soviet-era items still in Ukrainian stockpiles, such as the Buk air defense surface-to-air missile launcher that they don't necessarily have the ammunition for. So can it be requisitioned for use in other ways, such as sending distance surface-to-surface missiles? There's talk about a 300-kilometer missile that could be sent from a Buk, which would be super useful. Okay, moving on. Here we have more than 1,500 Ukrainian FPV first-person view kamikaze drones called Shrikes that were sent to the soldiers in the Donetsk direction, as according to Fedorov. This is super crucial. These are super crucial for the Ukrainians, particularly because they kind of do the same job as precision-guided munitions such as the Excalibur artillery shell that is precision guided, but they're a damned sight cheaper. And this is what Trentelenko says. This is why first-person view drones are the future of warfare. They are precision guided munitions which bring both cheap and mass to indirect fires. So although they might not have the destructive capability as an Excalibur shell, the fact that they are this much cheaper is incredible. So at $1,000 per FPV, this is a $1.5 million price tag or 15 Excalibur 155mm guided shells. So you can get 15 guided shells at the same price you can get 1,500 Shrike first-person view drones, which means that these come in at 1,000 times cheaper than a single Excalibur drone. Single Excalibur shell. You can use 100 times cheaper. So you can use 100 of these to every one Excalibur shell for your money. Now, what that then means is that they might have less explosive capability than the artillery shell. But if you can use 100 of them, then, I mean, imagine 100 of these hitting a vehicle as opposed to one shell, which, you know, might not always be accurate itself anyway, although they are, I think, pretty darned accurate, right? Just the future of warfare is, as Trent Selenko says, first-person view drones. Anyway, talking about drones still, Ukraine has reviewed, I think that means received, 15 of these Sonobot 5 USV. So these are unmanned sea vehicles, these are maritime drones, with 55 more coming in the future, apparently. What are these? Well, these are German drones, Sonobot 5 surface drones, have arrived in Ukraine from Germany. They can help to survey reservoirs and detect ammunition and other dangerous objects on the bottom. So things like mines and explosives ordnance that has been left behind. This was reported by the German DAIDUA project, which is, by the way, a great Twitter handle to follow, which monitors aid from Germany. The State Emergency Service emphasized that, quote, Sonobot 5 is mainly used for three-dimensional mapping. The device can be used during search operations to identify objects that pose a threat to the safety of people and infrastructure. Really good. Germany just coming up trumps. Now, great example of indigenous construction manufactured by the Ukrainians here. Ukrainian rolls out, do you see what they did there? Ukraine rolls out first domestic demining machine, which has a massive mine roller. I think that looks like it would be far less susceptible to mines exploding. It's fairly solid. There's less that can go wrong, I think, and more that can take the explosion of a mine. I mean, I'm not going to be 100% certain in that claim, but I think that looks more robust than other mine rollers I've seen. When you've got things like chains rotating that are much more open and can be blasted apart, this looks really compact, and I guess it's more robust. Kharkiv Oblast now has 9 mine clearing machines, but this is, quote, the first of our Kharkiv production, Oblast Governor Ole Siniebuhubov said. Really good news for the Ukrainians there. Anton Gershchenko says here, a Siberian battalion consisting entirely of Russian citizens has been formed in the armed forces of Ukraine. So this is directly under the control of Ukrainian armed forces command structure. The recruits who came from Russia represent various ethnic groups such as Tatars, Yakuts, Buryats, Kalmyks, Tuvans, and others. Quote, I am very ashamed of the crimes committed by Russia and Russians, including my people, one of the soldiers said. They believe that only blood can wash away Russian crimes against the Ukrainian people. Very interesting this, and it'd be fascinating to see, you know, how people like this operate, whether there's too much cognitive dissonance in their minds where like two ideas come up against each other in your brain and it gives you that disharmony. Or can they just get over it and do a job for the Ukrainians? Be really interesting. We've seen obviously volunteer groups do this, 2 volunteer groups operating predominantly along the northern borders of Ukraine. Interesting to see that happening. And again, this gives you a sense of the right and wrongness of this whole invasion. How many actually I could be wrong now. I was going to say, how many Ukrainian volunteer groups do you see operating for the Russians? But then you could argue that the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic are exactly that. But then the question is, well, are they that? Because they appear to be pro-Russian people that have come in, little green men originally is what started off those forces, but there will be pro-Russian Ukrainians within that. But Yeah, it's probably a bit too complicated for me to make that parallel across. But anyway, interesting stuff there. Now, as far as the Russians are concerned, this is according to the Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank. A report states that the Russians have been using a new kamikaze drone, the Is-Deli-53. It's a new version of the Lancet attack drone since October the 21st. This drone, according to the Russians, has an automatic guidance system that can distinguish between target types and increase the chances of a successful strike. So that, if true, is a worry for the Ukrainians, of course. Now, here we have some footage of quite a few bits of kit, howitzers here on a train. The question is, are these all in decent condition? There looks to be a bit of rust on some of those. And are they decent bits of kit anyway, like decent howitzers? I don't know. It strikes me that these are old bits of kit that we are seeing yet again being brought to the front. Some sources claim that these howitzers are from North Korea. BS, these are Russian junk from storage, says the Dead District. But still, if they can drop lead on the enemy, in this case, drop lead on the Ukrainians, then these still present a challenge. And this is the sort of stuff that underwrites the daily, consistently high numbers of artillery losses that the Russians are suffering, because they can keep drawing on these thousands and thousands of old bits of kit in Russian storage across the nation. And in fact, speaking of which, there is another excellent video by Covert Cabal worth following on YouTube. This is how long does Russia have left, the number of tanks, each type, and their decline this year. So Covert Cabal do a job of looking at satellite imagery of all the bases, repair bases, and storage facilities of Russian munitions, predominantly tanks and IFVs, but this is a tank video where they look at all the tank storages and work out how many bits of kit there still are compared to when they've done this previously, and they try and estimate and speculate whether these are high quality bits of kit or low quality. There are decreases. There are the TLDI is basically, you could argue that they're able to replenish at least quite a lot of what they're losing. They are front loading those replenishments possibly with T55s and T62s because and this is speculation, they're probably easier to fix up and refurbish and get back. The problem with trying to do that with stored T80s is you need quite a bit of probably sanctioned equipment to get those back up and running, because they require modern microchips and stuff like that. But if you're going back to the 50s and 60s, that's not going to be the case. And so those tanks you can get up and running a lot more easily. So that's why there might be more of those being sent to the front. But they map all of the changes to the satellite images and estimate how many tanks are being used, and then talk about production numbers and refurbishment numbers, so on and so forth. Anyway, worth going to check out. Igor Sushko on a similar kind of subject here. Take what he says with a pinch of salt sometimes. Russia's military equipment seen leaving Nagorno-Karabakh, so this is a disputed area in Azerbaijan that the Armenians have been fighting over for some time. How did Azerbaijan get them to leave? They shelled Russian military bases, destroying equipment and killing Russian soldiers. So the Russian soldiers previously were peacekeepers that were broadly on the side of Armenia, but Armenia have been cozying up to the west, so Russia might be thinking, well, there's no point being us being here, so let's get out and take all our kit with us, because that kit can be used on the front line. So this could be a worry for the Ukrainians. No escalation followed from the Azerbaijanis destroying the Russian equipment, and astonishingly, Russia didn't launch any Russian nukes. So again, it does make you wonder about the threat of escalation that has been touted during the Ukrainian war. But a few bits of kit here that you might end up seeing on the front lines in Ukraine, as they seem to be moving out of Azerbaijan. Right, moving on now to geopolitical subjects. We're going to start with a new attempt to imprison Memorial head Oleg Orlov for, quote, disrupting civil society by condemning Russia's war against Ukraine. Again, we go back. This is my fortnightly, have a look at yourselves, Russian voices, pro-Kremlin voices on my threads or anywhere else on the socials. If you are advocating for Russia and you think that Russia is somehow liberating Ukraine and Ukraine is somehow full of Ukro-Nazis and Russia is full of liberators, then have a look at how they treat people who show any kind of dissent. Have a look at what they've done to the freedom of press in their own country. There is no freedom of press. There are exiled entities like Mediazona and Medusa who have had to flee the country because they can't report within Russia. And as soon as you say anything against the war, you are locked up and sent away. So sent away and then locked up. It is not a country of liberty. Just have a think about whose side you're on and why, and whether it is indeed the right side. Right, Ukraine, Netherlands, and the Netherlands have begun talks on a bilateral set of security guarantees. Quote, the Netherlands is a reliable partner of Ukraine in making our joint victory closer. Head of Ukraine's presidential office, Andrei Yermak, has said. Netherlands have been a really close supporter of Ukraine, as I've said many times previously, partly due to the jet that was shot down during the Donbass war from 2014 onwards. The plane that was shot down by the Russians using a Buk air defense system, as far as I remember, had all of those Dutch people on board. They haven't forgotten that. The AP Associated Press reports that Biden and Xi Jinping agree on meeting next month. This is hugely important. US President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping have agreed to meet at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC summit in mid-November, citing an unnamed official, the AP reports. Biden and Xi reached an agreement in principle to hold the meeting, but details on the exact date and venue are yet to be worked out, the official told AP. The White House earlier said that the US and China were working towards a Biden-Xi meeting in November, but neither Washington nor Beijing have officially confirmed Xi would travel to the APEC summit. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister here, says, this is so distasteful. Says Israel's bombing campaign in Gaza is against international law. Now, while that may or may not be correct, right? Lavrov saying this is just a kick in the goolies of anyone who has moral fiber. Israel's bombing campaign against Hamas in Gaza goes against international humanitarian law, says Lavrov on Belarusian state-run news agency Beta. Do you know what? Have a look in the mirror, guys. Have a look in the mirror. Right, an exhaustive open source intelligence effort published in the New York Times revealed how the Russian Air Force, deployed in Syria since 2015, systematically targeted and destroyed 50 plus underground medical facilities operated by ISIS, but not by ISIS, but by anti-Assad civilian insurgents. This is a well-publicized campaign of war crimes perpetrated by Russia. Where were all the protests on college campuses then? Now, this is a bit of a dig at the growing groundswell of pro-Palestinian demonstrators who are demonstrating against Israeli bombing of the Gaza Strip. And again, while that may or may not be justified, morally and politically speaking, there is a definite taste of double standards here. Like, where were those people campaigning against Russia, protesting against Russia for doing horrific, actually targeting hospitals on purpose? 50 of them here. In fact, there's 700 cases, I do believe, that have been documented where Russia have done this. And remember, was it Médecins Sans Frontières? No, the International Red Cross. I think a number of international humanitarian agencies gave Russia the coordinates of hospitals in Syria to say, please do not bomb these. And Russia took those coordinates and went out and bombed them on purpose. So where were the protests against Russia? Russia should be absolutely it should be more of a pariah nation than it is right now, by any account. And that lack of protest against Russia, and yet a very strong protest against Israel, does smack of double standards. As Sergei Sumleny here says, nobody cares about the Russians deliberately erasing thousands of lives of civilian Arab refugees with their airstrikes. No protest demo in Berkeley or Harvard, because it is not about support of Palestine. It's about hating Jews and not so secretly wishing a new Holocaust. Well, I can't speak to those claims. What I can say is it does smack of double standards. And indeed, there is this kind of idea of selective outrage, because the Uyghur Muslims in China, while this was reported on widely in the news, didn't really receive, when they're sent to prison camps en masse, didn't quite receive the amount of defense that the Palestinian Muslims have received in Gaza. So again, there is definitely this element of double standards that I'm not sure sits well with me. And I'm saying this as someone that is, in effect, pro-Palestinian, but I'm kind of pro-people. I absolutely despise what Hamas did to Israel, and I don't like what the Israelis are doing to Palestinian civilians. So I sit somewhere in the middle saying, hey, you guys have both got to look at yourselves here. There are some issues you need to sort out, and I want you guys to live in either a one or two state solution. But I also recognise that a lot of other people are being very selective in their support of one side or another. And talking about double standards, it's as if I've planned it this way. Our government, says Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, of one of the districts in Georgia. I'm not a big fan of her. She's a big anti-Ukraine aid proponent. Our government is sending $1 billion worth to Ukraine every single month. Imagine the difference if instead our government spent $1 billion a month on mental health in America. This is possibly on the back of the shooting in Maine, where a guy really shouldn't have had access to guns given his mental health record. And it's like giving a razor blade to a baby. Don't do it. The guy went out and shot a bunch of people, so people are concentrating more on mental health maybe and not gun control, as is the way often. So this is possibly where she's going. America's hard-earned tax dollars should be spent solving America's problem. In other words, we should be spending money on mental health. And this is one of the best parts of Twitter at the moment and indeed Elon Musk just got called out himself on this. So the community notes called out Elon Musk, and to his credit, he wrote back and said, this is why I like community notes. It corrects me even when I'm wrong. So that was pretty cool. But here, Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of only 20 House Republicans who voted against legislation reauthorizing grants for community mental health services supporting adults with mental illness and children with emotional disturbances. We should be spending $1 billion a month on mental health. What's your voting record on mental health? Oh, no, I've said no to any spending on mental health. Any extra spending, no. Okay, right. Brilliant. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Right. Staying on American politics here, we've got Chris Christie. He's not saying anything new here, but this is important because it's in light of Mike Pence, the former vice president under Trump, who was a pro-Ukraine, very pro-Ukraine, very conservative Christian politician. So not a big fan, or he doesn't have many fans across the divide. Chris Christie has appeared on CNN and is actually probably got very many more moderate Americans that would support him than Mike Pence. Mike Pence has dropped out the presidential race, so he's now no longer in the race. So Chris Christie might pick up some of Mike Pence's support, possibly, especially as he is positioning himself on Ukraine very robustly. As he said here on Fox News, quote, when you spend 5% of your annual Pentagon budget to support Ukraine while destroying 50% of Russian military equipment, that's a good investment. And he's absolutely right there, of course. Republican and ex-governor of the state of New Jersey, Chris Christie, and he is still in the running for president. I don't think he's in with a chance, but Trump looks more and more vulnerable in the legal sphere at the moment. It's just each passing week is looking worse and worse for him. Right, Israel says it will combat, and also, interestingly, a number of his speeches. So a lot of people complain about Joe Biden's cognitive capacities. And I'd say, personally speaking, I think Joe Biden is too old, right, for president. And he's not at the top of his cognitive game. But I just don't think there's anyone else that certainly none of the Republicans I would want. So, and I think Joe Biden is doing a pretty competent job of international diplomacy at the moment, in a way that I don't think any of the others would be in a position to do. Any of the people running, particularly on the Republican side, maybe Nikki Haley. But Trump, a couple of his speeches recently, he's had cognitive glitches. There are plenty of videos you can go look at online where he is actually starting to have brain farts that don't look good for him, and he's a pretty old guy as well. I don't want to be ageist, but if you're in the most important job in the world, arguably, you need to be at the top of your game. Like that, surely that's an obvious statement. If you're in the most important job in the world, you need to be on it. Israel says it will combat the use of Starlink. So moving on from US politics, but staying with Elon Musk here. Israel says it will combat the use of Starlink in Gaza if Musk makes it available to humanitarian groups there, says Hamas. Says Hamas will hijack it and use it for their operation. So I'm just saying this because there's a link to Ukraine in terms of the importance of Starlink in terms of military command and control, and the prosecution of military maneuvers, right? It's super important and has great capabilities. Palestinians want to use it for humanitarian reasons, and Musk seems to be on board with that. This has enraged Israelis who would like to use it themselves, say, right, Israel's communications minister, in response to Elon Musk, Israel will use all the means at its disposal to fight this. Hamas will use this for terrorist activity. There is no doubt. We know it, and Musk knows it. Hamas is ISIS. So this is, again, Elon Musk and Starlink becoming a really divisive thing in another conflict. And I don't know where I sit on all of that with regard to, I know where I sit with regard to Ukraine, but it's all a lot more complicated when it comes to Israel and Gaza. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there as a bit of a sidebar because Elon Musk is never out of the news, it seems, at the moment. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. And one last thing to say, as one of my subscribers, effectively a member here, supports me loads. Guy Mikey from Cambridge has been away for some time. He's been away because he's looking after his ill mother who's just passed away. So I just want to publicly pass on my regards to Mikey because he's a really good man and supports the channel so much. So thank you so much, Mikey, for that. And thoughts are with you, my man. Anyway, take care, everyone. Look after yourselves. Toodle pips. Speak soon.